I defended this country as a young man.
We could come back to this country and we could be quiet. We could hold our silence. We could not tell what went on in Vietnam. But we feel, because of what threatens this country, the fact that the crimes threaten it, not Reds and not redcoats, but the crimes which we're committing are what threaten it. And we have to speak out.
Yes, I committed the same kind of atrocities as thousands of other soldiers have committed, in that I took part in shootings in free fire zones. I conducted harassment and interdiction fire. I used .50 caliber machine guns, which we were ordered to use, which were our only weapon against people. I took part in search and destroy missions, in the burning of villages.
In our opinion, and from our experience, there is nothing in South Vietnam, nothing which could happen that realistically threatens the United States of America.
Because we are probably angriest about all that we were told about Vietnam and about the mystical war against communism. We found that not only was it a civil war,
an effort by a people who had for years been seeking their liberation from any colonial influence whatsoever, we found that most people didn't even know the difference between communism and democracy. They only wanted to work in rice paddies, without helicopters strafing them, and bombs with napalm burning their villages and tearing their country apart. They wanted everything to do with the war, particularly with this foreign presence of the United States of America, to leave them alone in peace. And they practiced the art of survival by siding with whichever military force was present at a particular time, be it Viet Cong, North Vietnamese, or American.
For me, the military was a special kind of graduate school. And it taught me leadership, taught me responsibility, taught me hierarchy of organization. It taught me how to manage people in times of great stress, but also in normal sort of times within a corporate structure, if you will. It's almost a corporate structure, it's a kind of structure. And I learned skills that I think have lasted me for a lifetime.
And we cannot consider ourselves America's best men when we were ashamed of and hated what we were called on to do in Southeast Asia.
not isolated incidents, but crimes committed on a day-to-day basis with the full awareness of officers at all levels of command. They told the stories of times that they had personally raped, cut off ears, cut off heads, taped wires from portable telephones to human genitals and turned up the power, cut off limbs, blown up bodies, randomly shot at civilians, razed villages in a fashion reminiscent of Genghis Khan, shot cattle and dogs for fun, poisoned food stocks, and generally ravaged the countryside of South Vietnam. We're here in Washington also to say that the problem of this war
is not just a question of war and diplomacy. It's part and parcel of everything that we are trying as human beings to communicate to people in this country. The question of racism, which is rampant in the military, and so many other questions also. The use of weapons, the hypocrisy in our taking umbrage in the Geneva Conventions and using that as justification for a continuation of this war, when we are more guilty than any other body of violations of those Geneva Conventions, in the use of free fire zones, harassment, interdiction fire, search and destroy missions, the bombings, the torture of prisoners, the killing of prisoners, accepted policy by many units in South Vietnam.
we fought using weapons against Oriental human beings with quotation marks around that. We fought using weapons against those people which I do not believe this country would dream of using were we fighting in a European theater, or let us say a non-third world people theater.
What I really remember about it more than anything is the sense of everybody's commitment to doing their job, getting things done, working together effectively. It was exciting and scary and exhilarating and all kinds of emotions, sad. I mean, it was all kinds of things at the same time. But what really sticks with you is there was a camaraderie and a sense of accomplishment and purpose that was very special.
We wish that a merciful God could wipe away our own memories of that service.
57%, I understand 57% of all those entering VA hospitals talk about suicide. And some 27% have tried. And they try because they come back to this country and they have to face what they did in Vietnam, and then they come back and find the indifference of a country that doesn't really care. The country doesn't know it yet.
But it's created a monster in the form of millions of men who have been taught to deal and to trade in violence, and who are given the chance to die for the biggest nothing in history. Men who have returned with a sense of anger and a sense of betrayal which no one has yet grasped.
And suddenly we're faced with a very sickening situation in this country, because there's no moral indignation.
Because how do you ask a man to be the last man to die in Vietnam? How do you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake?
I know from my point of view, what I found over there was, I've lived part of my life in France, and during this period I used to go out and I'd see the bunkers outside of the houses, and you could get a very distinct impression for what it was like to be a country completely at the mercy of a foreign force. And quite frankly, when I was in Vietnam, I have to say to you that I just could never feel that I was there fighting to save that country, to make it safe for democracy. The only feeling you could have was that you were like the German, that you were there occupying another country.
An American Indian friend of mine who lives on the Indian nation of Alcatraz put it to me very succinctly. He told me how as a boy on an Indian reservation he had watched television, and he used to cheer the cowboys when they came in and shot the Indians. And then suddenly one day he stopped in Vietnam, and he said, "My God, I'm doing to these people the very same thing that was done to my people."
I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for duty.